Welcome to this symposium, to the semi-plenary session. The session will mainly be in English, but we'll just start with a very brief institutional introduction by Ludovico Albert, president of Fondazione per la Scuola. Fondazione per la Scuola della Compagnia di San Paolo is a partner of the Scuola Democratica, and it is the host of this semi-plenary session. So Ludovico Albert would like to say just a couple of words before we start. Thank you, Ludovico. You have the floor.
Grazie Marcello. Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Questo simposio è un simposio che nasce da una collaborazione ormai storica tra Scuola Democratica e Fondazione per la Scuola. Qual è il senso di questo simposio per noi? Per noi è che la scuola è cambiata tantissimo in questi ultimi 30 anni, da una scuola che era fatta per una formazione per una vita di lavoro e adulta tendenzialmente uguale a una formazione che richiede momenti di upskilling, di reskilling continui, da una scuola che era una scuola sostanzialmente fordista a una scuola che è molto centrata sulla personalizzazione e che richiede un lavoro fortemente centrato sulla personalizzazione e che richiede il fatto che tutto ciò che è, anche la scuola cambi moltissimo, cambi di ruolo, non sia più l'unico soggetto che forma, ma è un soggetto che diventa più regista di tutto ciò che costruisce la formazione dei ragazzi e poi degli adulti. È una formazione che quindi tiene molto di più in conto tutto ciò che è fuori dalla scuola, dalla famiglia, al territorio, alle risorse del territorio, il mondo degli educatori, il mondo delle città, le città educative, quindi i sistemi museali, le risorse dei territori. E naturalmente è un mondo che ha avuto un ruolo nuovo della scuola, che ha avuto una fortissima accelerazione durante la pandemia, e noi abbiamo visto che è un mondo che apre un sacco di possibilità, ma è anche un mondo che mette molti rischi, perché per noi che siamo un soggetto filantropico che si occupa di sviluppo del territorio, ma con un occhio molto attento alle situazioni di maggiore difficoltà, ci impone di guardare ai rischi di disuguaglianza che questo sviluppo crea e costruisce. Noi abbiamo visto durante l'epoca del Covid, in cui questa accelerazione è stata così forte, che abbiamo lavorato soprattutto su tre linee di sviluppo, su tre linee di attività principali. Il primo è il rapporto con il mondo esterno alla scuola, quindi con il mondo degli educatori, con il mondo del sociale, che ci ha aiutati a costruire maggiori relazioni, soprattutto nelle situazioni di maggiore difficoltà, tra ciò che la missione stretta della scuola e le famiglie e i ragazzi che erano in maggiore difficoltà. Il secondo è il tema delle tecnologie, dell'uso delle tecnologie, dove abbiamo lavorato sia sulle infrastrutture da una parte, ma soprattutto sulla professionalità degli insegnanti, sulla loro capacità di utilizzare in modo autonomo e creativo le tecnologie. E ancora poi la rilevanza fortissima che i temi che sono più legati all'autonomia degli studenti, alla capacità degli studenti di governare il proprio percorso di apprendimento, la loro capacità di governare le lezioni, la loro capacità di essere autonomi nel gestire il proprio percorso di formazione. Ecco perché quindi oggi abbiamo un simposio che su questi tre temi cerca di ragionare su tutto ciò che nel periodo del Covid è avvenuto, ma di come la scuola, anche dopo il periodo della pandemia, dovrà tenere conto di queste situazioni. E abbiamo quindi un panel di grande rilevanza, credo, che vede da un lato un dialogo tra il professor Bianchini e il professor Benasayag, vede un dialogo tra Marcello, Newman e la professoressa Cecilia Waismann, e vede di nuovo un dialogo tra Marcello e il professor Maccarini sul tema delle socio-emotional skill. E quindi io auguro a tutti buon lavoro. Mi hanno detto che devo fermarmi nei 4 minuti d'ordinanza, credo che ci sono rimasto. Buon lavoro a tutti.
Thank you very much, Presidente Albert. I guess it's time to start. Most of the session will be in English, and a part at the end will be in Italian. So I hope this can be a welcoming place for both our Italian-speaking participants and English-speaking participants. So what is this session about? Now, the name of this conference more broadly is Reinventing Education. And this is very interesting for us as a foundation because it's this is both something which is kind of strictly connected to COVID and to what's happened in the last year. So the issue of what should education be like in a post-COVID world? What should the new normal or the better normal be like? But it's also a question that we've been asking ourselves for many years now. Since we've had educational systems, we've been asking ourselves this question of how should we reinvent education? What should our educational systems be like? At the same time, it does make sense to ask this question now because some things are new, and what happened during COVID did actually teach us a couple of new things about what our system is like and what it could become. I'd say two things which are kind of new are, firstly, public awareness of how broken our system is and how much work it needs to move into the future. This in particular when we think about the kind of unfair impact that COVID and remote learning has had on the students who are already the most disadvantaged before school closures. The second thing which is new is we normally speak of how our educational systems are incapable of change, how they never change, how they stayed the same for the last century. Actually, what we've learned in the last year is that our systems are capable of change. And this is this is a reason to be hopeful about the future, and it makes us even more responsible today in trying to make our systems change for the better. What did we see this change in throughout the last year? Now, there are many things, and we're going to talk about this during the session, but just to name a couple, a first thing is the extremely rapid adoption of technology, of educational technologies in schools. After many years of very difficult penetration of digital technologies in schools, throughout just a couple of months, pretty much all teachers had to learn how to use platforms and techniques for remote learning. A second thing is a boost in collaboration between teachers. In Fondazione per la Scuola, where I work, we spend a lot of time talking to teachers, and one thing which really came up a lot in the last year is how much teachers have been working together as a result of what's going on. The third issue is an increase in the public's perception of the importance of education and of the complexity of education, of how multifaceted education is and how many different parts are included in an educational system and when we think about what schools are for. So to think about this, and to kind of use this as an opportunity to maybe draw out a kind of roadmap for future developments of our educational systems, we want to look at a couple of dichotomies which characterized our debate around education before COVID, and to see what has changed around these dichotomies, in particular around kind of hybrid practices which emerged around these dichotomies and which can kind of represent a way forward. So these three dichotomies are digital and analog. That's the first one. The second one is kind of the dichotomy between hard skills and soft skills. I know Professor Maccarini doesn't like the soft skills name, but we're going to talk about that later. Teacher and educator. So what does it mean to teach? What does it mean to educate? What is school for? And this also includes issues like formal and informal learning and other dichotomies like this, which were kind of destroyed by what we saw happen during the last year. Now, the first dichotomy, which is analog and digital, I will be talking about with Cecilia Waismann shortly. In this conversation, I'll be representing Riconnessioni, which is a project run by Fondazione per la Scuola. Lorenzo Benussi, who's the head of the project, should have been here today, but sadly he can't come. Similarly, Martina Encinas Martin was going to have a dialogue with Andrea Maccarini on the second dichotomy, which is soft and hard skills. Also, for personal reasons, she can't be here today. So I will be kind of supporting the professor in that dialogue as well. So before we start, I'd just like to tell you a couple of things about Riconnessioni. I'll try to make this short and sweet because here, much like in life in general, time is fleeting. So Riconnessioni is a model. It's the project I work on. I've been working for Riconnessioni now for 4 years. And it is a model developed by Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo and delivered in Turin by Fondazione per la Scuola. And it is, and the idea is to develop a model for education of the 21st century, for future-facing education. And to do so by helping schools become more innovative, inclusive, and creative, by removing the obstacles which prevent them from innovating. So it's a project which sees itself as an ally to teachers and to schools. Now, in the first 3 years, the project was implemented in Turin. It is now also being replicated in other territories, most notably in Cuneo, where it's funded by CRC. Now, the project focuses mainly on 4 aspects, and this is what we've done in Torino so far. The first one, in the spirit of removing obstacles to innovation, was we developed an ultra-fast fiber optic broadband network specifically designed for primary and lower secondary schools. Now, this is the fastest and best performing network of this kind for schools in Italy and probably in Europe. Now, in the last 3 years, we connected more than 220 school buildings to this network, so actual infrastructural work, boosting broadband penetration from 10% to 90%. Now, whoever here has worked in an office knows that without fiber optic broadband, there's very little you can do in terms of using the internet for your work. So we believe that by doing this, we are enabling digital practices and kind of online teaching and learning practices to happen, which couldn't happen otherwise. The second point is we involved around 60% of all teaching staff of all these schools. So we're talking about all the primary and lower secondary schools in Torino and the neighboring municipalities in innovative and intensive capacity building teacher training courses aimed at helping them make the most of technology in schools. Now, we don't have that much time to go into the details here, so I'd invite you to take a look at our website, which is www.riconnessioni.it. There's also an English section if you want to learn more about our teacher training methodologies, etc. But again, the idea here is to support teachers and to help them understand which technology belongs in schools, why, to do what, how you can use it. So really a capacity building initiative to support teachers make these decisions themselves. So also adopting a very kind of non-prescriptive approach to the adoption of technology. The third point is once we have this in place, so this massive training platform and the infrastructure, to attract other actors to the project, to use this infrastructure and this training platform and to kind of to boost the impact of the project. And this would include educational publishers. We worked with all major educational publishers in Italy. It includes other foundations, and it includes local and national public sector actors. Riconnessioni sees itself as a platform for innovation. So again, if there's someone here listening who wants to collaborate, please feel free to reach out. The fourth point is to use all of this energy and all this thought to collectively imagine, develop a new paradigm for 21st century education, and to do it together with teachers and with schools. Now, as you can imagine, many things have happened in the last year, including for us. We were clearly already recognized, at least locally, as a kind of center for training around digital skills. So as you can imagine, when remote learning happened, we had a huge surge in demand for training, for continuous professional development, from kind of simple things like how do you use something like this, something like Zoom, for a traditional lesson online, to really complicated things like how to do collaborative learning online or how to do project-based learning online. So the kind of more sophisticated methodological aspects of how to do remote learning. And going back to this, to the issue of this dichotomy between analog and digital, one thing that we really saw was that while pre-COVID, there was often this debate, even during the teacher training sessions, between it was as if you were either a technology enthusiast, like a Robocop teacher, really enthusiastic about technology, who really wanted I mean, technology is disruptive, it changes everything, it's entirely new, etc. Or on the other side were the teachers who were kind of characterized as being anti-technology, like the Luddites of the situation. Who were and the opinion there was something like technology is evil. There's nothing like a paper book to use in the classroom. The physical space of the classroom is essential, and this very polarized debate now seemingly kind of changed overnight to something completely different. We no longer hear this type of conversation. The debate between teachers is no longer characterized this way, and what we see is really the emergence of a consensus that hybrid solutions, which make the most of kind of methodological innovation, analog aspects of teaching, the use of space, things which have to do with managing relationships in the classroom, but also digital technologies, that these all go together. These are all part of the toolkit of the teacher. And it's interesting for us because this was our opinion as a project before COVID, but it was not the opinion of teachers, and it was not a kind of mainstream opinion in the pedagogical debate space. And that was very surprising for us, and it makes us very hopeful for the future. So I'd like to talk about this a bit further, but we're running out of time. So if anyone has any questions about the Riconnessioni project, please use the chat, and we'll reply either now or after the session. And I'd like to ask Cecilia Waismann, who was kind enough to join us today, to help me kind of make sense of these questions and of these issues. So firstly, thank you, Cecilia, for being here today.
Thank you.
I'd like to kind of start you off with a question, which is, if you can just maybe introduce yourself very briefly, tell the people here what MindCET does,
okay.
And also very briefly, what changed in your work, if anything did, during and as a result of COVID-19.
First of all, thank you very much. I'm honored and delighted to be here. I mean, talking to the other ones I'm meeting for the first time. For Marcello is always a pleasure. I always learn a lot. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I think, Marcello, what you just said about Riconnessioni, I think our organizations are in a way have very similar objectives in terms of education. I am one of the founders and the current VP of MindCET EdTech Center. We were almost 10 years ago, one of the pioneers in the world of saying that the world should use the entrepreneurial culture and the startup culture to help accelerate innovation within the educational systems. Today, we happily see that has grown and it's not a novelty anymore. MindCET started with this target, and Marcello just very well explained the need for us to understand the digital learner. So 10 years ago, we received this huge challenge. Our parent company is the biggest edtech education technology company in Israel. And our challenge is the digital learner is here. Educational systems do not know how to respond to this digital learner. So you guys have the task to figure it out and start providing a pedagogical solution. So 10 years ago, what we did is that it's not only about technology. So Marcel already answering your questions. It's not only about technology. It's not only about teaching educators technology or buying technology for schools. Is about culture. It's about understanding that the digital learner is not only the one that is learning in front of a computer. The digital learner is the young person of this century, is one that was born in an environment that is not only analog, not only digital. It's an environment that is more complex, that deals with a world with a lot of variables. Complex systems became a major part of this kid's world. So what we said that the digital culture, the entrepreneurial culture, has to be adopted by the educational system to be able to meet the needs of the digital learner. Again, I would like to emphasize, it's not about technology, it's about the digital learner, it's about a new way of learning. So MindCET started with an accelerator, trying to 10 years ago, no startups, they was not interested in education. So we started by attracting. Slowly, we also created accelerator for teachers. We also have an R&D where we bring the industry and universities to think entrepreneurial and to try to develop quick accelerated solutions. So MindCET's main objective is, we believe the world today, as Marcello and Professor Albert said, we have in a way to bring all industries to work together, to collaborate, to provide to transform the educational system to be able to meet the real needs of the digital learner. And whether we changed, of course we did, Marcello. I think 2020 was a very important year for all of us. Besides the horrible health issues, I personally believe it was a present for all of us that work in education. Was a year of learning. As you said, everyone, all the stakeholders of education, parents, politicians, educators, teachers, students had to see what is happening in the digital world. We had to look at education different. And as you said as well, we had to give a value to education that we're not giving before. So we did change radically. We also had a huge demand. MindCET has been talking about the digital learner almost for 10 years, and suddenly everyone is talking about it. And I'm going to stop here. For us, has been a present. This year has been a living lab where we try to learn as much as we can, and we have developed several programs to be able to respond very quick to this huge demand.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm wondering though, do you think that technology is still a contentious issue? I mean, even though there is a new awareness of how much, for example, in a situation such as COVID, in a kind of emergency response scenario, something like remote learning and technologies for remote learning can be vital. There's no substitute for them in this type of circumstance. Do you think that there is still the same type of resistance to technological implementation in schools or technological innovation of education as there was before, or is there less?
I think it's different. I think we had a few early adopters, passionate, as you said, the people that believed, and we had a lot of resistance. Higher education in 2020 had a very hard time, because when you build a way of expressing and teaching for a long time in a way have to change it very quick is not easy. I think K-12 in a way was more prompt to change. Having said that, I think today, because of all the forced early adopters, the attitude has changed. So the debate, I think, is different. Everyone had to experiment. Everyone had to see the advantage and disadvantage. So as I said, I think we have a huge opportunity today, because there's no one answer. It's not black and white. It's not digital or not digital. The world digital is here to stay, and it has changed the way we learn. we developed something called human-machine pedagogy, which is a way for K-12 to look at the new pedagogies as an interaction between human and machine. All kids, regardless of whether they have a computer at school or home, they live in this world where there's an interaction. There's a new entity here, which is this interaction that we created. We all see the world different. So technology is here as part of our environment. The intelligent machines are not anymore the ones that are only a tool. Technology is not a tool anymore. It's part of our understanding of the world. It has changed the way we perceive and we understand the world. So resistance or not resistance, I think, has been an opportunity. We all see it different today.
Thank you. Now, I think it would be nice if in general in this session we could kind of balance moments of pessimism towards the future or about what's happened and optimism towards the future. And as I was saying before, there are certain things that we saw happen, at least in our educational system in Italy, which make us optimistic about the future. And I'm wondering if there's been the same, if similar things have happened on your side, and if things make you optimistic, what's the best case scenario? What's the best case scenario of like radical change of your educational system, which you could be moving towards? And feel free to be kind of utopian here.
Okay. I'm going to give a very specific example. When we were talking about resistance, I think the resistance came from the educators. The students are there, but there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So what I'm extremely optimistic is that this capacity of change that you talked about, we do see and real. Together with a lot of institutions from around the world, higher education, corporate training, K-12, people that just wanted to change. There's a movement called Unboxing School Movement that is very active now, and we actually invite everyone to join, which says that 2020 has been a present to all of us. 2020 gave us opportunities that are unique for us to actually respond to the student. For many years, Marcello, we were all seeing ADHD, Ritalin, dropouts of the main universities in the world, a rate that it was speeding up. We saw technological companies saying, no need to study, no need for a certificate, no need for diploma. We hire you. We saw education was going one way and the rest of society was going another way. 2020 brought education to the mainstream where it should be, where we should not say, students, here's the digital world, go yourselves. No, we have an important social commitment. So I think we are extremely optimistic. We see more collaborations than ever. The Unboxing School movement provides very specific strategies. What we say, we do help schools. We say 2020 has changed dramatically the habits of all of us. We used to wake up, take a shower, have a coffee, go to work. We all change our habits. So every institution should choose one significant habit and transform it. And by this transformation, there's going to be a rippling effect of reflection, of understand that will allow the whole institution to rethink and change. At the same time that we keep this conversation going, we have opened up forums and meetups, and we are excited to see the response. Currently, we have this starting in Brazil, in the United States, tomorrow in Twitter, there's a conference, in Asia, in Korea. So I'm extremely optimistic, Marcello. I was very pessimistic in 2019 because I really thought that we had forgotten the students, that the dropout of students, providing them medicine, Ritalin, for them to be able to go to school, that was a disaster what was happening. So now I'm extremely optimistic. We are back on track and we can actually work with this new generation.
Thank you. That's great. I've got a very quick question for you. Then I'd like to reply to a question in the chat, and then I have a last question, and then we'll move on. So the very quick one is, you were talking about the unboxing schools movement. If you can just give the participants following, I don't know, the name of the website or more information, because I know you're also looking for people to join your movement.
Yes. I'm actually in the chat. I'm gonna share the website. Again, it's no one is owner. There's a lot of very important institutions as part of it. The idea here is anyone don't want to go back. We are very concerned about educational institutions that say, let's go back, let's give students to recuperate what they lost. No, we should not go back to anything. We should go forward. We should actually build an educational system that fits the current needs of what we need. So I just in the chat share the Unboxing School movement, which is basically opening reflections, debates with anyone that would like to transform, and also provide best practices for the ones that need a more one-to-one help.
Fantastic, thank you. So there was a question in chat, which is, Danilo asked, what is optimistic about the Italian system, as Danilo had arrived late to the session. One thing we were talking about earlier is how part of what has happened in the response of teachers to the crisis and their transition to remote learning has demonstrated a capacity for change which we could not take for granted before the current crisis. There's often talk of how it is difficult to change educational systems, and a quote comes to mind, which is from Andreas Schleicher's book, World Class, in the section where he's talking about strategies for effective education system reform. One of the points that he underlines is it's easier to change systems during a crisis or immediately after a crisis such as this one. And this is something which I think it is fair to say we could be optimistic about. Cecilia, I have one last question for you. I'm sorry, but you'll have to answer it very quickly because we're running out of time. The question is, now, a lot of these education technologies, which we saw implemented at enormous scale in the last year, had never been implemented at enormous scale before, because we had never seen such large scale, remote learning happening. So I'm wondering, is there anything that didn't work? Would you say that there is any kind of category or type of technological solution for schools which you discovered during remote learning that actually that's not really what schools need? Actually, it's not useful.
Yes, it's very difficult to answer. Okay? A lot. I think also for us advocates of technology, yes, a lot of things did not work. The first thing were the business models. Startups saw a huge opportunity here. Oh, everyone is here, so let's give it for free and then charge. I'm sorry, that's not how schools are. You need to build credibility. You have to test, you have to pilot. The educational system, thank God, is a system that does protect the students, that does protect its society, which is great. The resistance, Marcello, also comes from this protection, for this commitment that we have to society. So I think a lot of things did not work because there was a lot of demand and too much people taking advantage of that. Also, one last thing, because I know we don't have time. What we learned here, which I think was essential, that school is not only about content. A lot of people has been saying, you mentioned Andrea Schleicher, say a long time, but educational system did not believe. The biggest mistake in the beginning of 2020 was all around the world, regardless of the country, everyone, what they did is to bring a lot of educational content in a digital form, thinking this would resolve. And suddenly we realize school is not about content, especially today. Content is part of the story. What happens in the schools and universities is much more than only eating content, and this was a huge learning. And if you see what happened in the second part of 2020, social emotional learning became a big issue, still is. Skills and competencies, to be a self-learner when you are in front of this machine. to be able to learn, to be an independent learner. It's essential skill education should target. So yes, the beginning was more mistakes than positive things, but thank God, people were learning, are still learning. So that's why I'm very hopeful.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for being with us today.
Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity. I was delighted to be here.
That's
thank
great.
you.
So we're moving forward now to the next dichotomy. And thank you, Cecilia, for having mentioned social and emotional learning in a digital context, because that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about now. Someone has their microphone open. Okay, great. Now, Professor Maccarini, you have the floor next, and this was going to be a dialogue with Marta Encinas Martin, but we're going to have it's going to be you yourself and I, in a sense. But what we're going to be talking about is, in the same way that we talked about kind of moving past this analog digital dichotomy as a result of COVID. What we'd like to talk about with you is moving past the kind of hard soft skills dichotomy. So I just start by asking you just to tell us a tiny bit about what Fondazione does on the subject of social emotional skills, and then just to riff on that. So you have the floor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Marcello, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm clearly not Marta Encinas Martin. I apologize. This is an ontological issue which I believe is insurmountable. Now, first of all, Marcello, you're right. I don't usually like soft versus hard, because it's always escaped me why geography would be hard while courage or stress resistance would be soft, either in content or in impact. But this is a sort of a side issue. In recent years, and I won't introduce what this topic has been in various disciplines and the social domains and so on, because this would be too general. But just to mention what Fondazione Scuola has been doing for the last few years. There have been two distinct, though related, research projects which I have the pleasure and the honor to coordinate. One has been dealing with mainly self-productivity, which means, well, as most of us would know, social and emotional skills are often studied concerning their cross-productivity, which means their impact on something else, like life, the so-called life outcomes, or various kinds of life outcomes, like chances on the work environment or the job market, and so on and so forth. Now, we've been mainly dealing with the processes through which social and emotional skills can be fostered or hindered as a result of schooling processes. That means, in a sociological perspective, we wanted to study social and emotional skills as part of and integral to the whole process of socialization, more particularly of schooling. So what we did was basically measure social and emotional skills at the beginning and then at the end of a school year, and in the meantime investigate the processes and the various dimensions of school cultures and organization that we then tried to connect with social emotional skills, with their with the impact they had on social emotional skills, supposing some processes, teaching styles, school cultures, school climate would have a positive impact and some others wouldn't. So this is a first research project. It's been very relevant to me. We learned a lot, particularly about not mainly explicit programs of teaching social emotional skills, but mainly, as I said, as social emotional skills as part of a whole learning and teaching and learning environment. We learned a lot about, for example, the relevance of a consistent school culture, and also on the relevance of a teaching style that should be neither authoritarian nor unconditionally supportive. But this, of course, we have no time to go deeper into this, but it would be very interesting. The other project is also very interesting. It's still up and running. We're not done with it, and it was clearly inspired by the pandemic situation. And here we...
Oui, ça y est, j'ai réussi.
Sorry?
J'ai demandé à un voisin. Dis-moi une chose. Et donc, tu commences à me faire des questions.
Excuse me, Miguel. Hi. Thank you for being with us. We're I think you'd have to mute the microphone for the moment as we're doing the second part.
Right. Right, okay.
C'est parfait, parfait. Écoute, très bien. Excuse-moi, c'est parce que je suis très bordélique en ce moment parce qu'il y a toute une délégation.
Monsieur Benasayag, si vous
travaillez avec moi.
pouvez éteindre...
Je comprends, je comprends. Je t'embrasse à tout de suite. Là, j'y vais.
D'accord. Donc, now I was saying, picking up where we left off. I was saying this second project I wanted to mention quickly tried to deploy the concept of social emotional skills as a way to study the impact of distance education this year on students' personality and agency. Of course, we read everywhere, every time that distance learning as a discontinuity on the learning biographies of young people and students may have had a strong impact, and then sometimes dangerous impact, sometimes a negative impact, and so on and so forth. But here again, we don't want to be either optimistic or pessimistic in principle. We're trying to understand the way students' personalities and agency are being influenced by distance learning. Learning it from their voice mainly. We also here too we've been measuring social and emotional skills, but also we're trying to understand how young people are reflecting upon this discontinuity and upon the future in terms of their capacity of concern and commitment. And this is something we are not done yet and will be done by this fall. So I'll tell you more in the next conference, I guess. But I think this, these two projects talk to some of the major issues that are, say, on the floor about social and emotional skills. This is mainly what I wanted to say about the projects. I don't know if you want to.
That's great. Yeah.
Drop in.
So we had discussed a couple of topics that we wanted to talk in this section, and I think I'd like to start from one which is, I'd say, which is relevant both for the points we discussed before and with what we'll discuss afterwards with Professor Bianchini and with Miguel Benasayag, who I thank for being with us. I see you have just arrived. And the question is, do you think, similarly to how there was a change in perception around kind of what space digital technologies should have in education as a result of school closures and remote learning, etc., do you think there's been a change in perception on the general public or of teachers or of schools on the importance of the social-emotional skills aspect of education as a result of school closures? Has anything changed in the perception of the importance of these skills?
Well, yes, but here again, I'd like to emphasize that I think public attention has been mainly on the negative side, saying how this distance learning has been impacting or is threatening to impact on students' personalities and agency in negative terms. We've been talking about students' depression and then their incapacity to make sense of their biographies in general, which is even worse, and of their educational biographies in particular. I don't think this is wrong. I just think this is too, let's say, too a priori, and should also be studied empirically. And this launches, I mean, from here, from this bulk, various different themes emerge and should be studied. One is, surely, you were mentioning technology. One, I think, is the connection, the link between socialization and platforms. I think we need to learn more precisely to have a less polarized debate. You were mentioning before that the debate on this is quite polarized. Here, I think we need to learn more about how platforms, particularly educational platforms, comprise a new educational environment, but also more generally, more broadly speaking, a more, let's say, a conditioning environment for socialization in general. So for human agency and reflexivity emerge. So they're clearly impacting on how we deliberate, how we make decisions, how we interact with each other, how our reflexivity develops, how we develop typically human capacities, like, for example, embracing long-term commitments. Okay, and I think this is one point that we need to study, and we need to learn more about empirically, theoretically and empirically. Both dimensions are involved. This is one first thing, one first factor. Another one is, I mean, at least that's my impression, and I'm really sorry Marta and Silas is not here, because I really wanted to discuss this with her, is also another thing, and it's a thing President Albert mentioned right at the start of this symposium, which is personalization. Personalization of teaching and of learning. And here the issue is really deep and serious, because on the one hand, I believe personalization should not be confused with mere individualization. They're two different things. On the one hand, social skills, mainly, let's say, social relations and emotions are apparently threatened by the situation we're living. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, there was, in an important university in Italy, there was a conference about the future society, the post-pandemic. It was called the post-pandemic society. But you know who the guest speaker was? He was a technologist, but he was supposed to speak about the future society. And he mainly, his speech mainly revolved around how technologies may constitute sort of an extension of our bodies that would help us keep at a distance from each other, because we need to in some moments, like, of course, an epidemic situation. But he was, all the speech was about how technologies might get to be extensions not just of our minds, which is kind of obvious now, but of our bodies too. Well, the bodily dimension is also an issue here. We don't have time to deal with this, but I very much like to. And so, I mean, social skills are clearly threatened. They're already a problem with many young people in our countries, in advanced societies, but it seems to, it risks getting worse. Now, so the point here would be, if this is the case, what do we mean by personalization? I don't think we should just provide more individualized education, which is one side of the coin, one face of the coin. It might be good in some respects, in terms of better or an open range of choices, of educational choices. But I think this would be a very limited way to conceive of this. Personalization in education also means that social emotional skills reveal a side of personalization we haven't dealt with. That is, that we are teaching some people and maybe not other people, because we are addressing personalities in a very one-sided way. Very important outcomes of previously of an OECD research that's been conducted for the last couple of years is precisely that. For example, there are gender differences in social and emotional skills that profoundly affect the way we learn, the way, for example, boys and girls learn. And the risk here is to teach someone and not teach someone else, then believing that we are addressing all and that everyone is treated equally. So this issue of personalization is really about providing quality education for all, and also talks to an issue of equality of opportunity. Yeah. There's also a class-related issue here, because it one other outcome of research projects internationally is that social and emotional skills are not equally distributed, but they are also influenced by class, not just gender, but social class too. So, and here a big issue opens. It would be nice to have the time to debate, to discuss it, about the possible issue is here: should we use social emotional skill for assessment, or should we teach social emotional skills? Should we enhance social emotional skills, not make them something that should be assessed like we're assessing personalities? So, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Professor. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that was it.
No, well, yes and no. Let me just quickly go. let me go very quickly through a third point, but I'll be very quick on this, and then maybe we can discuss it further. I think we should also develop, and there's a third theme, and we also still know very little about this, a culturally sensitive approach to character skills or social and emotional skills. The bridge to gap here, as I understand, we're trying to bridge gaps here, and so let me let me conclude my quick speech by just pointing to some supposed contradictions or oppositions we could bridge through this concept. One is about, say, a culturally pluralist way to understand social and emotional skills, and another one that is more, so to speak, universalistic. But the point is very important here. Social skills, emotional skills are also culturally defined, and this is something we should face, because I don't think any educational system would want social and emotional skills to become a tool for ironing personalities, or to construct sort of a global self. While at the same time, we increasingly need cooperation, intercultural cooperation, and the related skills. So I think this is one bridge to gap. And so the let's say the cultural sensitivity of the concept is another theme for present and future research. Oh yeah, please go ahead. It's better for you to go ahead, because I would end nowhere. I mean, go on forever. So please stop me.
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm sorry to have to butt in like that. I didn't do it on purpose just there a minute ago.
Oh, you do have to do it.
But it is true that I have the unfortunate role of being the bad cop in this scenario, and time is fleeting once again. So thank you so much, Professor. I hope we'll have more time to talk about this in the future. I know you have another panel discussion on this tomorrow. Am I correct? In 2 days?
No, it's on Saturday.
On Saturday,
we have a double panel session on Saturday. So this is clearly a commercial here. We're doing it's at 9 to 11:15, and then again 1 to 3 p.m.
So that will be an opportunity to learn more about Professor Maccarini's research on social emotional skills.
Well, and all people who are going to present, of course, not me.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have one third issue to look at today, which is the third dichotomy that we're interested in this very kind of brief, energetic conversation, and it's the dichotomy between education, let's say, and teaching. So between teacher and educator, istruire or educare in Italian it would be. So the kind of very broad question about what is school for? What do we expect from our systems, and what do we expect from our teachers? Paolo Bianchini from Fondazione per la Scuola will maybe tell us a tiny bit about the work we're doing on the subject, which is the Provaci Ancora Sam project. I invite you again to take a look at it on the internet. If you look for Provaci Ancora Sam, I'll write it in the chat. You can find a lot of information on it. And Paolo Bianchini will be having a dialogue with Miguel Benasayag, who's joining us from Paris. Thank you, Miguel, for being here. And just before leaving you the floor, I'd like to read you a question that we've received in the chat. And I wouldn't ask you to address it directly, but I'm sure that indirectly it will come up in your conversation. And the question is, and it's a huge question, where is there room for empathy in our post-pandemic world? How do you address the challenge to form young generations to complex systems and systems thinking without losing empathy? So I'd say the bottom line question there is there a trade-off? Is it an out between understanding complexity and having empathy for others? So thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Miguel. You have the floor.
Thank you, Marcello. We switch to Italian. Approfittiamo del fatto che Miguel parla un ottimo italiano. Qualche tempo fa l'hanno invitato anche all'Accademia della Crusca, quindi evidentemente è dei nostri. Eventualmente però, se ci sono altre domande in inglese o in altre lingue, sono le benvenute. Noi possiamo tradurle per renderle, come dire, fruibili a tutti. Dato che il tempo è tiranno e vedo che ne abbiamo veramente pochissimo, io sarò rapidissimo per iniziare appunto un dialogo con Miguel, che credo che tutti conoscano e che, come dire, di cui sfruttiamo le doti di filosofo, di psicologo, ma anche di studioso di biologia fondamentale. Credo che toccheremo anche alcune delle questioni che Andrea Maccarini ha accennato, ecco, nel suo intervento. Rapidissimamente voglio solo spiegare il senso di questa dicotomia, no? Tra educare e istruire, che tu hai avuto una legittima difficoltà a tradurre in inglese, no? Dove education di fatto parla di entrambe, no? In italiano invece si tratta di due cose diverse. Allora, nel Provaci Ancora Sam, questo binomio, no? Non questa dicotomia l'abbiamo sperimentata da tempo. Il Provaci Ancora Sam è un progetto che dalla fine degli anni '80, quindi da quasi 30 anni, da più di 30 anni, si occupa di insuccesso scolastico, di abbandono scolastico. È un progetto interistituzionale che Fondazione per la Scuola porta avanti con alcuni assessorati del Comune di Torino e con l'ufficio scolastico regionale. Nel corso di questi decenni il progetto è molto cambiato e si è passato dall'essere di fatto una scuola per la seconda opportunità per quei ragazzi che da soli non avrebbero mai preso la terza media, a una serie di interventi, di modalità di interventi di diversa natura, ma con alcune caratteristiche comuni che adesso vado rapidamente a spiegare, che riguardano alcune migliaia di studenti appartenenti a oltre 40 scuole della città di Torino. Diciamo che possiamo distinguere davvero in maniera molto sommaria, poi grazie Marcello, se hai anche indicato nella chat il link al progetto dove si possono trovare i dettagli. L'impegno più grosso ormai in realtà avviene in quello che noi chiamiamo il sempreventivo, ovvero attraverso gli interventi che educatori e insegnanti conducono in classi e anche in 3 scuole ormai, integralmente in tutte le classi di 3 scuole, dove coprogettano e cogestiscono lezioni insieme per tutto il gruppo classe, oltre al fatto che poi gli educatori dedicano anche un tempo extrascolastico ai ragazzi che sono più in difficoltà. Però diciamo che l'intervento fondamentalmente è su tutto il gruppo classe e non su piccole porzioni. Una seconda azione del SEM avviene nei CPIA, dove anche qui educatori e insegnanti lavorano a stretto contatto nella sempre coprogettazione e cogestione di attività all'interno e all'esterno dei CPIA. I CPIA sono i centri che si occupano dell'istruzione per gli adulti e dove di fatto oggi studiano i ragazzi e gli adulti di recente o recentissima immigrazione. Quindi la popolazione è per lo più composta da non italiani per nascita, ecco, diciamo, ma da nuovi cittadini, ecco, nuovi o nuovissimi, perché alcuni arrivano in corso d'anno. Terzo intervento, se vogliamo residuale da un punto di vista numerico, è ancora rivolto a quei ragazzi, e qui sono per lo più italiani, che invece non riescono ad acquisire la terza media e che quindi vengono seguiti in un processo in un progetto che viene chiamato di tutela integrata, grazie a insegnanti distaccati dall'ufficio scolastico regionale e anche qui alla compresenza con educatori. Allora, vengo al dunque, perché vorrei ragionare con Miguel su una serie di temi che sono emersi durante la pandemia, no? E che sono incentrati proprio sulla compresenza, la coprogettazione, ma scusate, insisto anche sulla compresenza nei momenti chiave della vita della scuola, come può essere il consiglio di classe, di insegnanti ed educatori. Ciò su cui stiamo lavorando e la pandemia ha sottolineato questo tema è che oggi come oggi non è più solo sufficiente diciamo accontentarsi di far andare a scuola i ragazzi, ma è importante lavorare in funzione del fatto che vadano meglio a scuola i ragazzi, attivando un processo che in generale questo lavoro a stretto contatto di educatori e insegnanti riesce a fare, in cui il sentirsi meglio, il sentirsi meno inefficienti, meno incapaci, meno imbecilli in tanti casi, no? A scuola permette ai ragazzi di attivare un percorso virtuoso per cui, come dire, hanno più fiducia nei loro mezzi e quindi di fatto riscoprono o scoprono per la prima volta anche un po' il piacere di cominciare a studiare, da cui di nuovo ancora una volta arrivano delle conferme sulla propria autostima. L'altro aspetto, il lavoro a stretto contatto di insegnanti ed educatori in questo momento ha permesso di perdere molti meno ragazzi rispetto a quanti sono stati persi anche solo in altre scuole, in altre classi delle scuole del Comune di Torino. Perché? Perché avendo gli educatori un contatto, oltre che con i ragazzi, spesso con le famiglie, con le loro famiglie, sono andati in molti casi a prenderli uno per uno o hanno, come dire, mantenuto i contatti anche nei momenti di didattica a distanza, soprattutto quello dell'anno scorso, nel primo lockdown, che è stato molto, molto difficile da gestire, insomma. Diciamo che quindi il senso è che l'obiettivo è quello di lavorare su tutto il ragazzo, su tutte le ragazze, no? Intesi come adolescenti o bambini, perché parliamo delle scuole elementari e delle scuole medie, e non solo come studenti di singole materie, no? Allora, però, appunto, il primo tema che vorrei sottoporre a Miguel è questo, cioè questa operazione che nel SEM abbiamo imparato a fare nel corso degli anni e che talvolta ci viene bene, talvolta no, perché bisogna anche dirlo, è particolarmente difficile perché mi sembra che la scuola sia spesso così preoccupata di trasmettere delle discipline e di dare anche alla fine dei voti sugli apprendimenti, che si dimentica che il compito vero della scuola è quello di trasmettere il patrimonio acquisito dall'umanità, no? E per questo appunto deve preoccuparsi molto di educare oltre che di istruire. Ecco, allora la prima domanda che ti faccio è: ma perché educare a scuola appare così difficile? Perché per quanto leggo io questo è un problema che non abbiamo solo in Italia ma che abbiamo dappertutto.
Bene, buongiorno. In realtà io parlerò questo italo-gnol che è il mio. È vero che è accaduto di fare una conferenza all'Accademia della Crusca, dunque dopo questo momento mi hanno detto io parlo un italiano perfetto, ma è troppo perfetto può essere. Sono anche stupito dell'inventività, la creatività che voi avete, che tu hai messo Paolo per reinventare il mio nome di famiglia. Mi piace molto, penso a adottarlo perché è molto più creativo che il mio. Bene, educare, istruire, perché la scuola trova dei problemi? Come il mio lavoro fondamentale è il ricercatore della interfaccia tra la neurofisiologia e il mondo digitale, per dire così. La mia pratica in psichiatria sì, continuo a avere dei pazienti, ma sul tutto il mio lavoro è da ricercatore in questa interfaccia, che è l'interfaccia effettivamente di questo nuovo mondo in quale noi siamo. La prima ipotesi di lavoro per me, tanto ricercatore, è veramente che noi non stiamo attraversando una crisi e che anche il Covid non è una crisi, è un'accelerazione di un cambiamento d'epoca. Io penso che noi siamo veramente in un cambiamento d'epoca. Questo cambiamento d'epoca non abbiamo il tempo di svilupparlo, non è necessario perché è conosciuto, i assi principali sono conosciuti, ma per dire questo che è più obiettivo può essere per noi in quanto ricercatori, sono tutti i dati dell'antropoceno, questo che si chiama l'antropoceno, per dire che in realtà noi viviamo adesso dei processi irreversibili, veramente dei processi irreversibili con collapsi vari, no? Collapsi vari che vi mettono in altro mondo, no? Io ho lavorato moltissimo intorno alle modificazioni che operano la semplice promiscuità con le macchine digitali in quotidiano, perché prima ho lavorato molto per l'impianto cocleare, ma dopo ho voluto lavorare, capire cosa fa il cambiamento neurofisiologico della promiscuità con le macchine digitali. Bene, questo che voglio dire è che noi siamo in un cambiamento d'epoca assoluto. Se io dico questo, il resto è chiaro, perché il resto è trasmettere cosa? Perché trasmettere vuol dire che c'è una linea possibile, pensabile tra il passato, il futuro e il presente. E in realtà il passato, dal punto di vista di questa novità permanente, questo cambiamento permanente, no? Anche questo cambiamento del posto dell'essere umano dentro dell'ecosistema, no? Questo cambiamento fondamentale, tutta l'educazione razionalista, occidentale, un po' cartesiana, no? Chi va a mettere l'essere umano come soggetto, il mondo oggetto, tutto questo dispositivo è finito. Dunque in realtà educare significa cosa educare? Perché educare fino a 50 anni fa era effettivamente assumere il fatto di essere un essere umano in Occidente, no? Da noi, le indios, da noi non pensavano così per niente, non pensano ancora così. Ma educare significa assumere il ruolo dell'uomo, che chi è il pastore dell'essere, direbbe un germanico conosciuto. Dunque, ma se l'uomo non è più il pastore dell'essere, che non è più pastore, non è essere, non è più pecore, veramente oggi educare per me, per essere rapido, per me educare significa essere capace di contenere la paura davanti un sacco, non so come si dice, avalanche, non so come si dice in italiano, no?
Una valanga.
Come si
una
dice?
valanga, no? Una valanga.
Sì, così io imparo un po' qualche parole, io approfitto anche. Una valanga di incertezze, Dunque per me quando io penso cosa è educare, per me educare significa veramente aiutare agli adulti di diventare adulti e non solamente invecchiare biologicamente, no? Diventare adulti, dunque di essere capace di assumere questo orizzonte che c'è un nucleo nero oscuro che non è depiegabile. Dunque per me la questione è quella: perché è difficile educare? È difficile educare perché educare implicano futuro. E cos'è questo futuro? Cos'è? Perché in di là di qualcuno che sia di un autismo assolutamente formidabile, noi il futuro siamo diventati tutti punk, no? Non futuro, no? Almeno non sappiamo niente. Dunque educare significa una cosa che non abbiamo per niente l'abitudine, che è assumere il presente. Assumere il presente, assumere le asimmetrie che noi troviamo in presente. E questo che io voglio trasmettere. Io voglio trasmettere ai medici, al ricercatore che io formo, che io lavoro, o genitori. No, io penso che questo che noi dobbiamo cercare a assumere noi e a trasmettere. Come assumere il presente e trovare le asimmetrie che danno senso nel presente, e fare il lutto di ogni visione teleologica di un futuro che giustificherà il presente. Non abbiamo più questo, ma non è un dettaglio. Non avere un futuro che giustifica il presente non è un dettaglio, è fondamentale. Ma questo non è un disastro per me, non è un disastro, malgrado le minacce non è un disastro, ma è una sfida.
Però credo che, premessa, non ho scritto io il tuo cognome, amico mio, cioè lo conosco un po' bene, so come si scrive, però forse è stato trascritto un po' velocemente, ma no, sono certo che...
È già abbastanza complicato il mio cognome ebreo sefaradita, ma qui è diventato surrealista.
È un po' postmoderno, ma giuro che non sono stato così fantasioso, insomma, ahimè, sono molto più razionale terra. Senti, io toccherei un altro tema che hai evocato, no? Perché appunto il fatto che sia impossibile ad oggi, adesso, educare o insomma guidare nel presente, no? Alla luce del fatto che non abbiamo più un futuro chiaro, anche un po' teleologico, quindi fare i pastori dell'essere, come diceva Heidegger, è un'operazione complicatissima, ma soprattutto quello che compare incontrando tutti i giorni ragazzi e insegnanti è che questo però, se mette in difficoltà gli adulti, mette ancora più in difficoltà i bambini e i ragazzi. Abbiamo un livello di crescita mostruosa, scusa il termine non tecnico, di malessere psichico da parte dei ragazzi e da parte dei bambini, no? Che è aumentato tantissimo in questa pandemia, anche da parte di soggetti che non hanno evidenti problemi, possiamo dire così, familiari, no? Una volta forse ce li saremmo aspettati dalle parti di popolazione più fragile. Oggi non è più così, no? Allora, la scuola in questo senso mi sembra particolarmente impreparata, non gliene faccio una colpa, ma non è abituata, no? Allora, però questo malessere c'è, è crescente e dobbiamo farcene carico, no? Allora, però il tema è un po' come farcene carico.
No, senti Paolo, in realtà ti dico, no cinicamente, ma felicemente che la gente ha reagito male, no? Che la gente non ha continuato a vivere tranquillamente, felicemente che hanno fatto delle depressioni, che sono diventati un po' violenti, che vanno male, felicemente che vanno male, perché altrimenti sarebbe complicatissimo, perché già l'imperativo postmoderno attuale è di dire sia contento di funzionare, evita su tutto di esistere, perché è troppo complicato, no? Esistere è troppo complicato, implicano un certo livello di negatività, di incertezza, abbiamo di incertezza dappertutto, no? Dappertutto. Dunque hanno provato di vedere se è possibile di funzionare a fondo, no? 90% di funzionamento. Felicemente stiamo facendo un'esperienza, non è possibile. Questa crisi del Covid, in di là del lato sanitario, è una crisi antropologica, no? Del biopotere, della distruzione del medio, no? Di tutto, no? Di malattie emergenti, reemergenti, ma è una crisi globale. Bene. dentro questa crisi globale effettivamente vi trova un'umanità che cercava sempre di più di funzionare, c'è anche una estetica identificatoria del funzionare, no? Vogliamo essere macchine, vogliamo diventare macchine, no? Tutto questo stupiditi del transumanismo, tutte queste bugie, no? Adesso, come per miracolo, non si sente più parlare, no? Perché è chiaro, no? Io che sono qui in Francia, il nemico dei transumanisti, il mio caro collega, quando si dice, per non dire il mio odiato collega, no? Quelli che parla del transumanesimo, che dicevamo vincere la morte, no? Laurent Alexandre si chiama, non so perché, lui che voleva vincere la morte fa 1 anno e mezzo che non parla più. Può essere perché qualcuno che pensavano vincere la morte e che si trova senza poter vincere un virus, un piccolo problema, no? Ma in realtà la questione è così, questa crisi ha detto dobbiamo sfidarsi di tutto, dobbiamo sfidarsi di tutto, dell'altro, del corpi, dunque dobbiamo sfidarsi. Ma dentro di questa crisi e con tutto questo che stava già salendo, no? Di funzionare, la pedagogia di competenze, imparare le competenze pratiche, no? Utili, che già è contro la natura stessa dell'essere umano, che è di essere profondamente inutile, no? Non si tratta di formare dei bambini inutili, no? Si tratta di non formare dei bambini che funzionano dentro di un'utilità che è un'utilità esterna alla loro vita, un'utilità dittata per la macroeconomia. Bene, dunque in realtà come si impara, come si fa per fare esistere? Ma questa è una sfida, perché un pedagogista non è perché pedagogista, un psichiatra non è perché psichiatra che veramente sa come esistere, piuttosto siamo tutti convinti, invitati a funzionare. Nella psichiatria c'è un sacco di teorie, di pratiche adesso che fanno funzionare benissimamente la gente, fino a un certo punto. Questo punto è un punto che comincia la distruzione. E dunque tu dici, ma come fare? Io penso che il problema principale è di mettersi d'accordo tra una minoranza almeno, di che noi stiamo vivendo un cambiamento d'epoca, quali sono le sfide centrali, e che non è una questione tecnica, no? Non possiamo arrivare a una scuola e dire ai pedagogisti: sentite, per esistere voi dovete fare questo, 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 e dopo mezzogiorno questa altra cosa. Non esiste questo. In realtà dunque è veramente una sfida epocale, centrale, antropologica, dentro della quale noi dobbiamo pensare anche come imparare, no? Voi sapete che dentro della medicina questa rivoluzione sta essendo fatta, no? Senza dirla troppo, ma è quella di guarire, finire con la malattia. Tutto questo non è più questione di questo. Come viviamo con la malattia, la cura palliativa non è semplicemente per il morente, no? La cura palliativa è una filosofia della medicina che fa con la malattia. Dunque è un po' questo.
No, grazie Miguel. Senti, un ultimissimo ragionamento rapido, perché abbiamo veramente pochi minuti.
No, da più io c'è un paziente che sta aspettando per vedere se io lo metto a funzionare un po'. Sta funzionando
no, ma
male.
tu devi farlo.
Tu mi aveva promesso di intervenire più presto, dunque l'altro è qui, vuole funzionare, io le ho promesso.
Ma la cosa importante l'hai appena detta, però lui sta esistendo, quindi questo è fondamentale.
Tempo sguardo, perché anche tu sai, c'è un canino adesso, il canino va, viene, ma... Bene.
No, va bene. No, ma l'ultimissima, proprio una battuta, no? E non è naturalmente una ricetta, ma credo che forse la prima cosa che noi adulti possiamo fare è quello di essere noi i primi a non avere paura, no? Indipendentemente da tutti i concetti, da tutti i preconcetti, da tutti i luoghi comuni, però credo che il nostro compito sia quello di non avere paura. Ecco, tu che con la paura biograficamente hai avuto molto a che fare, se ci dici una frase mi fai piacere. Perché forse non tutti sanno che, visto che hai fatto...
Il lato italiano, no? Faccio come il mio compatriota Francisco, no? Io dico una parola de fede.
No.
No, senti, paura abbiamo tutti, la questione è non cedere alla paura. È una buona frase per il paziente.
Va bene, grazie. Grazie Miguel.
Grazie per l'invitazione.
Grazie mille.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you so much, Paolo. Thank you so much, Miguel, for being with us. Unfortunately, our time is over. It's been a real pleasure to share this panel and to share it with Cecilia, with Ludovico, with Andrea, with Paolo. I'm sorry that Martin Sinas Martin couldn't be with us here today, and also Lorenzo Benussi, but I'm sure we'll find other opportunities for this type of conversation in the future. It's been a pleasure for us as Fondazione per la Scuola to host this panel, and we'd like to thank also Scuola Democratica for being so kind with us and also so generous with their time, seeing as we're 10 minutes late. But 10 minutes isn't that much after all. Thank you for being with us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.